This week, I'm taking the story of Saturn in Pisces to the next level. The story is so much bigger. In fact, Saturn in Pisces time, like the transit, is the grand finale of a far longer story that was unfolding between Saturn and Neptune since 1989. So you may well not have been born, depends, on your age. I know I have some younger people watch, and I know I have some others that are my age or even older. So for us who have been born and lived, quite maybe intensely during that time, we will be able to weave a story of what this Saturn in Pisces now transit that will eventually made a conjunction to Neptune, but in a different sign, and I'll talk about that and why this is so important. We'll be able to make real sense of it. So like make sense of it, a sense of it, right? And so with that in mind, for me, maybe because of my age, so forgive me the younger ones, but you will still have plenty of material. There is 1998 and 1999 and then 2006 and 7 and 2015 and 16 that we will be looking at, and I'll be guiding you in some ways to how to interpret your own, what was going on for you. So there will be for every age here, but I think for us who have been, around and alive and kicking in 1989, this will make such a juicy contemplation and a juicy wrap up, and putting a stamp, a meaning, a closure even onto such a long period of time. But any of those other periods of times are also going to have that closure, right? Because if you weren't born earlier, you weren't born. It's not like you just missed a lesson and you can't conclude. No, you can conclude too. So, but why is this so? So any other time Saturn in Pisces, I would have possibly been talking differently about it. But the reason I believe that this Saturn in Pisces is going to be about looking back and contemplating is because, like I say, it's a grand finale. And why is it a grand finale? Because Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces are going to be traveling together until the moment they're going to be leaving together. There'll be a crossover. There will be a time of a bit of a crossover, but don't worry about that. That's when you get too ditty and bitty and technical, and I don't like that sometimes, especially when it's a big, long, unfolding story. You get lost in the detail, and I don't think that's helpful for me anyway. But yeah, so they'll be traveling together. They're traveling together for the last time in long time, till whenever Neptune's gonna come back to Pisces, which is none of us will be around. Until they're going to, so they're traveling around and they're moving together at the same time into Aries. And so that conjunction happens at 0 degree Aries. And those conjunctions, which is what I'm referring to when I say 1989, which is when the last conjunction between Saturn and Neptune happened, which was in Capricorn, 11 degrees Capricorn, so take note of that. But, we'll talk about stuff and you'll have time to take notes later as well. Any conjunction means now we're starting afresh, we're starting anew, and that's when the new story of the two archetypes relevant to our life, depending on all the other transits that were happening for us at the time and all that, starts. So, and then obviously everything up until that point is the ending of the previous story. So that's what I mean. It's a grand finale. While they're in Pisces together traveling, they're truly both ending for forever, right? Like, whenever Neptune's going to be in Pisces again, like this particular story, the Pisces story, that and the story of whatever preceded before between the two of them is just so beautifully wrapped up, is being wrapped up. I mean, we are in it still in this last phase, but it's you can always think of the way I'm going to be speaking of this. You'll hear me use the language of the moon phases, which is how they are interpreted and made sense of these phases that I'm going to talk about. So think of this last phase as like the dark moon. So what do we do in the dark moon? We let go, and we could, it's good to journal often, like the whole last quarter phase is good for journaling, and that would be in our case of this huge story of Saturn and Neptune since 2015. So look back in your journals, and however you take notes of your, record your life, basically chronicle it, to contemplate it, right, and all that. Look back through journals from 2015. And in fact, I have the most intense period of time, the number of journals, number of journals I have written, I have gone through, notebooks, right? Since that time, and I know specifically that time because of what happened to me in my life then and all that. I know them visually, I remember them as well. It's like I go through Not so much at the moment, not so much for the last couple of years actually, but up until last couple of years, I would go through 2 a month easily 2 a month, and I keep them all. So you can imagine, and it's interesting how that was, and why am I correlating the journaling with the last quarter phase of Saturn and Neptune, which is a last quarter, which was in 2015 and 2016. Saturn was in Sagittarius, Neptune was in Pisces, because that's, like I say, that's like a last quarter moon. So we had a full moon and then we had last quarter, so it's like the darkest phase between last quarter and the new moon, which is 2015 till 2026 is that phase, the dark phase between up until the new moon, right? That we have with moon every month. So you recognize hopefully that is the time of getting quieter with yourself and just kind of looking back and like reviewing what's happened and you know how you're going to prepare for the new moon, right? So there is that, but there is also, far more importantly, is Saturn and Neptune are all about making meaning. But making meaning in a far grander scheme of things, like what is the point of life? What is the point of living? Why am I here? Those are Saturn in Pisces, or Saturn in Pisces definitely, but Saturn and Neptune questions, because every planet has its own contribution to this question and its function to make this question meaningful and effective, you know, the answer essentially relevant to our experiences. But Saturn and Neptune are the giants of it, are the elders of that question. So with Saturn in Pisces people, which I probably mentioned last week, that is like their bread and butter, literally, which is why it's the poet archetype. But for all of us, through the transit, and if we have them, you know, aspecting natally Saturn and Neptune, this question will be, or if we have Saturn in 12th, or this question of the meaning of life is far more felt on day-to-day basis in our day-to-day reality, and that's Saturn is like the reality, like what we have created, what we have manifested because we have acted and made certain choices, and we compounded and made denser and denser our reality, and it's become whatever it is, right? And so, but also because Saturn is the closest to Neptune in that birth. You want to watch my last week, so don't cover it fully in detail, so I don't repeat the last week's video. But there is a birthing model that says Neptune comes first, that's the amniotic fluid in our bodies. Then the next phase of contraction starting and the fetus being pushed, or the baby at that point being pushed through the cervix, and then it goes through the canal. The canal is Pluto, and Uranus is liberation, i.e. birth, when we are out crying, you know, out of the body of the mother. But the moment that when the baby goes from the amniotic fluid and the blissful state of, you know, just connectedness with everything and all that stuff, right, is the trauma of, you know, the shock of that. Now we are pushed through something that how do we possibly squeeze ourselves through that, right? All of that is, all of a sudden we become aware of our body, our form, like all these walls of the cervix are pushing against that, we push against, it pushes against that. It's like being in the vice, which is the very term I used when I talked about last week, mentioned happy Saturn return to everyone who's having Saturn in Pisces natally, and it will probably feel like being in the vice, because that's what that Saturn archetype, in terms of how we are birthing it, right, is it manifests. It's that vice-like pressure, which is how form is made. And the hardest form, I think it's diamond, isn't it? And I also talked about that last week. So is created through immense pressure, right? So this was just to illustrate how the two are close. So Saturn is the first that remembers Neptune. Is the only one that actually has a connection with Neptune so direct and so immediate, which is why these breathworks that Groff and in this birth model, that there are ways of taking people back to that state. We can actually recollect them because Saturn is so close to Neptune, and Saturn is how we, it's like seeing, we get our life in our hands. It's like the proof of our existence is Saturn, and Neptune is something we can't prove, but it is a proof of a kind, of a different kind of existence, of a bigger existence. So this piece about making meaning is like there is the truth that's beyond us, beyond every day, beyond, that we call spirituality. Maybe some people like myself use art and poetry and creative outlets to connect with the let's say divine, the spirit, something far bigger and greater, to experience spiritual practice. We use art, or you might be just spirituality without art. I don't know if you know what I mean? Like there may be other ways of connecting with Neptune, basically. I can only speak of what I know, which is art. So there is that truth, and then there is Saturn. And so Saturn in relation to Neptune is art, or it could be like a ritual. If you have a church, is Saturn, because it's trying to embody that Neptunian ultimate meaning. Because that's the point. We're all wondering why we're here. Well, Neptune has the answer, but it's through Saturn that we get the answer. Religion being one of them, as in churches, right? Physical manifestations of Neptune, or attempts at it. Let's not go there. Poetry, music, art, all of that is a physical, material manifestation of Neptune that we are in our daily existence trying to practice in order to feel like our life, has purpose, our existence has meaning. So that's why, looking back at journals, which are ways of making meaning since 2015, if you look back, right, and reread them, particularly look at the transits of Saturn you had and on Neptune, that you'll figure out for yourself, like what they are, and those days, and those weeks or months or years, since 2015, will give you your Saturn will give you such, or I should maybe rephrase it and say this way, are the most wonderful way to use this time of Saturn through Pisces, right? Is to contemplate the period that I just said, the way I just suggested. Okay, but let's start from the beginning. So 1989, they were conjunct. So this is did I say this? Because I always take a few takes before I get to the one that I will use. So the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, the next one is in February 2026, 0 degree Aries, right? Which we won't be talking about here, I don't think much. But so back in 1989, February, Saturn and Neptune were conjunct in Capricorn, 11 degrees Capricorn. So think about what you have at 11 degrees, obviously Capricorn, near enough there, right? Also squares, like any other cardinal signs around 11 degrees, and then other earth signs and water signs are the happy kind of, easy. But it's usually, I always highly recommend, to worry about, especially when you're looking such a big, long story, and you're looking for challenges, like what have you been overcoming, what have you been working with, like you want to look at conjunction, squares, and oppositions. So around 11 degrees cardinal signs. And Capricorn would be conjunction, that would be the most intense and amazing. So have a look at that in 1989, what was going on in your life. But that's the time when they started started a new relationship, and they'll started a new phase of their relationship, and then there will be a next phase, will be next February 2026, and then whenever next and all that. So that time happening in and I love. So just listen to this synchronicity, or the beautiful, symbolism, if you like, or beautiful astrology. So Neptune was in Capricorn, and Saturn was in Capricorn, obviously, their conjunction. So Neptune was ruled by Capricorn, and Capricorn is in domicile. Currently, and they will be close, they will be very close. They won't make exact conjunction, Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. They won't make the exact conjunction that they're making at 0 degrees Aries. But as you can imagine, coming up to that date, and I think that there are maybe a couple more moments where it's more than close enough that it would be considered conjunction, but it's not that conjunction that starts a new phase of relationship. So in Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces versus Neptune in Capricorn and Saturn in Capricorn when you all started in 1989 are so similar, because now Saturn is ruled by Neptune. Neptune was ruled by Saturn then. So there is like there is another way of saying this is neatly being wrapped up, and nothing in life is neatly, and certainly in astrology, or life even, you know. So I don't mean it like that to kind of, you know, like Pollyanna style neatly, but there is a sense of full circle coming, and like I feel it in my bones. Maybe it's my age, you know, whatever, but I just feel that by the time we're in 2026 and the new cycle starts, we will have really, really shedded so much of actual weight, and I mean possibly body weight, and likely, you know, but like there will be big major chunks, like major life stories, and it could be my age, because there are many that are truly, you know, old and blah blah, but I don't know. I think it's an opportunity for all of us, certainly, and I would love to hear younger ones if you have thoughts on this, younger viewers, to share. I would love to hear. But I know for us who, you know, are older, I think this is what that means. It's like really, you know, when you can just like wrap it all up, and it's the wonderful feeling when it's rubbish, you're taking it out and you kind of tie it neatly, nothing's falling out, nothing spears the rubbish bag, and it's actually all fits, and now you can discard it and be done with it, right? In a nicest possible way, in a way of like it's due to be gone, right? And so I love that. It's not synchronicity, it's the mirroring. Like, it's a mirroring, isn't it? But it signals to me like a full-bodied wrapping up of something. So think back at that. Look back February 1989, what was going on in your life. Look at your journals and look at your 11 degrees, Capricorn or other cardinal signs, and thereabouts, you know, what planets and how that, what was starting, what was, what kind of new meaning making, what kind of, like, you decided that your life is now going to be about this and not more about that. Like, you are changing your reality, because one of the things that Neptune and Saturn do, they change reality, because Neptune is all about dissolving and Saturn is reality. So if Saturn is ever amiable and malleable to be dissolved and reshaped, is in Pisces or during conjunction with Neptune, or during any other transit of Neptune, right? So our reality in 1989 was changing on a level that is maybe not as obvious, because there is a whole new, you know, cycle. So, but you will see as you kind of look at these timelines, these timestamps, if anything, you will see that story emerging, that new reality getting clearer and clearer, and culminating, and then now being wrapped up to be gone by 2026. So that was 1989. Then the next phase, meaningful moment in their relationship, is the so-called first quarter square, which is, think of a moon first quarter square, which means it becomes moon. If you think of the moon, it becomes visible for the first time. Not for the first time, but it kind of like, it gets that kind of more substantial, you know, visibility. And what that means in terms of its symbolism, let's say, its message, its invitation, is that we are now, so from the new moon where we don't see the moon, to this first quarter, we are getting ready for something. So look at the diaries of 1989 and just think of what was going on, and, you know, in your life, obviously, but then that period from 1989 to 1998 and 1999, so almost 10 years, right? That period of 10 years, what was germinating, what were you trying to give form to? What were you trying to birth? What were you trying to give form, right? Being Saturn. Now, what's interesting, this is another, this is why I love astrology. All these little time points that I can connect and kind of make sense of stuff that maybe when I experienced it was like, what was all that about? Why? Kind of thing. And then time is needed for it to make sense. So, an interesting point is that Pluto will be in Capricorn, the last degree of Capricorn, 29 degrees, this September, October, and November. The last time in Capricorn in our lifetime, right? But more importantly, the last, that anaretic degree of Capricorn. In 1998, no, I lie. No, don't lie. Exactly. 1998, November 1998, this first quarter square was actually at 29 degrees Neptune in Capricorn and Saturn at 29 degrees Aries. So I don't know, but I feel like there is such a like a arrow pointing, like pay attention, underlining that this Pluto 3 months journey or sojourn, living in last degree of Capricorn, will give us something, some clarity, some resolution to whatever was going on in November 1998 or around that time, in the run up to it. So throughout 1998 in particular, and then obviously those last 10 years, as I said, since 1989. But I think 1998 is particularly important, and something during this Pluto last transit in Capricorn will speak to it, will make sense to us more, or will bring it back up for final resolution or something. So think about that. And then in, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here, April 1999, they were squaring, this is still the first quarter square, they were squaring each other. So Saturn was at 4 degrees Taurus, and Neptune was at 4 degrees Aquarius. So now they moved from Capricorn and Aries, but they were still making a square, right? In the Capricorn and Aries, they were making a square. Now they're making a square from the Taurus and Aquarius. So think about 29 degrees Aries and Capricorn, and then 4 degrees Aquarius and 4 degrees Taurus. What you have there, and how was this affecting you? Obviously, look back at your time and your journals or your life to make sense of what. So something would have to now is kind of gathering, is being visible, is becoming visible. And it will all depend on what you have in these. This is why I don't like talking about, Saturn in Taurus and Neptune in Aquarius could mean all kinds of things, obviously, but it's ultimately for you, the house and what you have in there that will determine the ultimate meaning of this. And so then we have 2006 and 2007 when they're in opposition. So what happens now, the opposition time, which is a full moon phase, something becomes like it's complete and we can see it. It becomes, it's been realized, right? So in 2006 and 7, looking back at 1989, whatever was starting to percolate then in 2006 and 7 would become, or should become, ripe and realized, fully realized. Now this is opposition between fully, like in 2006, 17 degrees Leo, Saturn is at 17 degrees Leo, and Neptune is at 17 degrees Aquarius. So that's the first opposition in 2006, and then the second opposition is in 2007 at 20 degrees Leo, Saturn, Aquarius, Neptune. So again, look at those degrees in fixed signs in your chart. What houses they are, even if you don't have any planets in those signs, or obviously if you have planets, then so what was going on, and so what have you realized in those areas of your chart that has been, then you can trace back its origins back to 1989. And this kind of work, I have a video or two, and I don't know, I'll have to, if I find them or even remember, if not, just look for them. It's like how to journal with astrology. I have at least one, if not two, and how to plan. So you'll find them on my YouTube channel. The idea is, like, it's a lot of work. It's you can't get too waffly. You have to keep the dots connected if you are to draw out a message and a lesson of Saturn and Neptune. You can't be too vague. You can't be too, like just nondescript or too, fluffy. You have to get precise. And so you're looking for the common denominators. If what seems like it's actually been realized and delivered, and whatever in what did I say, 2006 and 7, is like you think, oh, that's that. But then, is that? Look back at 1989. You need to connect it to 1989 to make this really sharp, pure-ish. I don't like the word pure, but you know what I mean. Just like a reduced, like when you're cooking, you're reducing a sauce. So it's like the really thick and substantial, meaty lesson during Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, right? The last leg of that journey, the grand finale. So just be mindful of that. Does it connect to 1989? So if it doesn't, dig deeper. It might not be as obvious. It might be. We'll get to that. So follow me. So that's opposition. I've given you the times and the degrees and the signs. And now we have the last quarter square, which I already mentioned. So 2015 and 2016. In 2015, Saturn was at 7 degrees Sagittarius in November and December. So this is 2015, November and December. Saturn 7 degrees Sagittarius and Neptune 7 degrees Pisces. So what have you got 7 degrees? Sag, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, right? So this was extra meaningful to you. And then in 2016, the last quarter square was at 12 degrees Sag, Saturn, and Neptune in Pisces, 12 degrees. And that was June 2016. So at this stage, you can now, because I even thought, do I go backward to show you how to do this? But I don't think so. Anyway, I think I would get lost. The idea is that by the time we get, and then we have now, since Saturn 2023, last year, first entry, well, and he didn't dip back into Aquarius, so it's been in Pisces in 2023, 0 degree being so important again, and all that, the Pisces, like it will be when they join together in Aries in February 2026. So all of this will only probably start to make sense now. And for the next 2 years, right? So exactly 2 years, right? It's February 2026. So my point is, this you will have to keep refining what that is. What was this for you? What is this story for you about? And so 2015 till now is the probably best time, and obviously for the next 2 years. But it's for the next 2 years, it's contemplating it, doing all this work that I'm talking about now. But the actual things, the evidence, the facts of whatever you will conclude by February 2026, and you will be done with fully, and it will have been, like it will have been out of your system, it will have, it will have been, and it will have ended, will have been happening in 2015, in 2016, 2017, I would say up until 2020, just the actual meat of that thing that will die, right? Now we are contemplating, but the meat is still in 2015, 2016, the events, the whatever was going on. And so one thing to remember as you contemplate this for the next 2 years is that it will feel today, so during Saturn in Pisces, today, right? And this year and next year, and there will be a clear sense of disorientation, which can affect how you are making sense of this. Plus, having Neptune in the picture means we can never possibly grasp something as clearly and as logically as we'd like. So bear that in mind as well. I think, in a way, and disorienting piece, like being disoriented, it's being disoriented or feeling disoriented, maybe in that particular sphere of your life that you have by now identified that is the story that's for you unfolding, is because that's the phase we are in. That is Saturn in Pisces in general, plus with Neptune in Pisces, with this whole grand finale I talked about, mentioned earlier, right? That sense of ending is so palpable. And like any ending, like think of the moon ending, it just gets dark, right? So we don't see as clearly. But because it's Neptune and Saturn being the elder, the wise one, this one too, Neptune being wise as well, but it's that wisdom that we can't put in words, as I've said many times. We will know it. We will have that sense that the form has not delivered. So by the form, I mean the actual reality of that storyline has not delivered exactly what we feel and think we wanted maybe with it. But remember that is the predicament of Saturn and Neptune being together, and Saturn in Pisces, right? So, And so there may be a sense of failure. But remember that the failure from Saturn and Neptune perspective is the failure of being born, right? Uranus failure would be we are not born, like the baby doesn't get born or dies before he gets born dead, right? So the Uranus doesn't become live, doesn't activate in that birth model that I watched last week as well. I'll go into more detail, but so the Uranus archetype is the birth, when we come out of the body, and the failure of us not being born, i.e. incarnated, would be failure for Uranus. But for Saturn, the failure is the incarnation, in the sense of it, because it's so close to Neptune. It's like, and that closeness, don't dismiss it. It's essential to understanding Saturn in Pisces and Saturn and Neptune dancing together, because it's like twins, right? Like twins. And if they're separated, the failure, even though that's life, right? Both twins will feel, certainly one that feels more like Saturn, feels more, meaning knows more in terms of 3D matter and all that, will feel like it's a failure. That's what I mean. So the fact that we are incarnated, the fact that we have given form to a reality of a Neptunian kind, is in itself a failure, because it's not Neptune, right? So the twin that's separated, maybe by death even, from another twin, the surviving twin will feel like a failure, because that identity of a twin that's so essential to its sense of self, like Saturn sense of self is so essential, Neptune is, so essential to Saturn's sense of self, because they're so close to each other in the process, will be gone. So the identity feels like a failure, because it's not that identity anymore. But what Saturn's, which is why in another video I spoke about why Saturn is actually our life's work. It takes that long to learn the lesson that is not a failure. And so, and that the failure doesn't have the negative connotation. It is a form without Neptune fully and completely realistically or truthfully Neptunian, because it's not. But it's infused with it, and that's enough. And so, like with the form, Saturn, this piece about being enough is amongst other archetypes which also can echo this, but Saturn beautifully so, because it's the archetype of it is enough, because it has to be enough, because the form is not infinite, matter is not infinite, so it has to be a point where that's enough. We can't put form infinitely. We can err, we can have feelings that are infinite, we can have all this like Neptunian stuff that's infinite, but Saturn is not infinite, and that's how it is. That's Saturn, that's the beauty, that's its identity. But because it came out of Neptune, it's complete opposite. It's taking a lifetime to accept that it's enough, to accept that it's that reality that it created, however imperfect by comparison to what Neptune version of it is still enough, and it's actually perfect in Saturnian sense of criteria of perfection, right? So that's what I wanted to leave you with. When you're contemplating all of this and coming to realization, you will feel, because that's you, and it's inevitable. And just remember that that's like in life, when you have lived, and lived some, and you don't have to be old for that. You can be young, sadly, some kind of death or tragedy, or some loss, some grievous loss, right? You kind of have to learn to live with that sense of always being there, but also your own happiness in your own life. And that's Saturn in Pisces, or Saturn and Neptune, right? Which is that. So this thing will always be there, but that's the poet archetype I talked about in last week's video. We have to not just learn to live, because that's what a Neptune does. Well, both of them together have their own version of beauty. And it's important, that beauty piece is so important for Capricorn, Saturn and Neptune, because Capricorn as a Saturn, Saturn, are timeless. And what's that? Like a Capricorn beauty is considered to be elegance and timelessness and very kind of, kind of beauty that everyone would recognize as beauty, almost like a not conventional beauty, but that beauty that's timeless. Okay, I'll leave it to that. You know what I mean. And so the point in this on this journey that I have described of how you're going to be reflecting on your life, and you're coming at this stage of Saturn in Pisces times till 2026 now till then, you will feel like that lack of like the imperfection, but the invitation, the medicine of the two coming together is that beauty, you allow for that acknowledgement that it's not perfect. You allow for you to know there is better. You allow for you to know that there is more beautiful and more amazing Neptune thing out there, but also you accept and allow for your Saturnian side, which is everything that we are is Saturn. Like the world we live in is Saturn. So give him love, give it love, right? You will love that too. With that sense of loss and with that sense of disorientation, with that sense of like, it's not exactly that, but it's still beautiful, right? That's why I use this example of like living with the loss, but you still live your life. So there is part of you that always has that pain, but it doesn't stop you from loving your life as it is, however it is. Well, I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you enjoy this till 2026 years, till next 2 years, and this process of reflecting back on the last, didn't do the math still till since 1989. And please let me know in the comments how all your story basically.